So I will be talking about institutions. Institutions are the rules that define what we can do, what we should do, and what we should not do. This is from Elinor Ostrom, a Nobelist who has passed away, who studied collective governance of nature or lands. Okay, when we are, just like in the example there, when we are thinking of new mechanisms like the compensations, we are very bound to have to think about rules. We will be establishing new rules. And those rules will carry with them, when we negotiate about them, the histories and legacies of what people have thus far had rights to and what they expect their rights to be in the future. So this presentation builds on the work that we have done in the Habitat Bank of Finland that several people have already talked about today, and Markku Ollikainen will talk about more next. He leads this, in a way, cluster of projects. I also build on the work that we did on the Habitat Bank as a regulation mechanism in Finland with Jukka Similä, Veera Salo-Kannel, and Elina Raitanen. The two last are here today. And a survey we did a couple of years back, and another data set that's comes from an EU public consultation, and a lot on my earlier work on voluntary mechanisms for biodiversity conservation. Okay. So the compensations are about conserving biodiversity. We are conserving biodiversity for the collective good, for everyone, and also for everyone in the future. What can these everyone's claim about nature or biodiversity? In the Finnish constitution, we state that everyone has the right to clean environment. People want to derive benefits from nature. They want to enjoy nature. But they also might want to protect nature for its own good. They might be interested in protecting nature in their nearby areas, close to where they live, because this is where they visit and experience nature. But they might be very much wanting to conserve biodiversity elsewhere, like we, in our current times, are so connected globally, we are quite aware of things that happen to biodiversity across the globe. So there's the issue of where to protect nature. What would these people then expect from compensations? They would actually expect that the biodiversity conservation works, that they will get these benefits. And biodiversity is in great decline, like we have heard in many presentations today. And one of the reasons for biodiversity decline is that we have changed the habitats to much more uniform than what they would originally have been. So, for example, agriculture and forestry have gradually changed habitats, and they, with their operations of managing habitats, continue to change in a very gradual fashion. They degrade biodiversity. These actors who do this, they still have a lot of sustainability commitments and concerns, and they want to conserve biodiversity. And they are committed through different best management systems, through different regulations. They're actually trying to follow a precautionary idea about what they do with the environment or with the nature. These actors want to, of course, make economic benefits out of using the habitats. But they also, very importantly, we have found that they want to maintain an autonomy of deciding what is done to the habitats. And they are used to using different payments, especially farmers receive a lot of different payments. So they're used to thinking in terms of measuring what's good for them and comparing the different benefits. And they want to protect nature for altruistic and social norms reasons. They want to serve the society as well. This is how they genuinely feel, we have seen with the research. What do they then expect from compensations? They expect that the compensations would provide them new income opportunities and an opportunity to manage the land in a more sustainable fashion to serve these more altruistic goals. Biodiversity is then degraded in other ways as well, so that we actually remove nature from specific sites or larger areas. And this type of operations, when they happen in a limited site, we can often identify the kind of company that has an economic interest and is responsible for biodiversity degradation. So it could be a mining company, it could be a factory that's built somewhere, or just a construction company. This type of actors are very aware that they are in the nature-destroying business. And they have shown a lot of interest in mitigating and in trying to minimize the harm that they do. And they follow a lot of corporate social responsibility principles, and they are exposed to a very heavy regulatory control system. They go through permits, and they have permit processes that can last for years. For them, the compensation, this type of people, would be about getting reputational advantage, following through with their corporate social responsibility ideas, and actually reducing some of that regulatory burden to somehow make their processes more predictable and more smooth. And they're very good at making use of the reputational benefits. Okay, and this type of actors have actually shown interest in being the forerunners, so they're actually developing the ecological compensation in practice at the moment. Some construction projects then are not about one company or one sector, but they're much more justified with societal needs that are dispersed across the society. So you have infrastructure development that serves a huge number of different economic interests. The stakeholders are numerous, and you also have a really large set of stakeholders as compared to the individual companies that often encounter the neighbors. This type of infrastructure processes often have entire countries interested in them. So you have a really big number of stakeholders. They're managed by professionals who are very aware of the sort of landscape level impacts, and they operate also in this kind of landscape optimizing environment. So these the technical and administrative procedures in these processes are very detailed and complex. And these types of actors, when they think of the ecological compensation, they're actually thinking that that would help them in allocating the harmful activities in an optimal fashion and minimizing harm in the landscape. So they're expecting that this will help them in the optimization. But you can have construction processes that actually wipe out everything. That so for example, urban sprawl, you might really convert the land to just asphalt and concrete. So with this type of a picture, I'm just wanting to illustrate that sometimes the processes that we deal with in thinking of compensations are extremely technical, extremely detached from the nature. And the actors that are the beneficiaries of this conversion of land, taking it away from nature, are numerous. The value chains are very long. The consumer is somewhere at the end of in the future building, watching TV, very detached from what was here before. And actually, we are then thinking that those consumers and the different professionals who represent them and who mediate in the negotiations across this whole complex administrative and technical process, and the businesses that are involved, that somehow all of that would manage to interpret the need to protect nature, and even in these very detached systems, remember that we are causing environmental harm. Okay. And so that's the type of actors that we have. And another really important reality setting that we have is that biodiversity conservation budgets, the state budgets for providing us the public good, are shrinking. And there where the shrinking is very sharp, around those times we have actually politically made global and European commitments to taking up compensations. So there is in a way a turn to thinking that we have to engage the business, and we are not, the state is not the only payer for biodiversity conservation. Well, here's just in a nutshell that the idea is that actors degrading habitats compensate for the damage they generate by conserving nature. The final thing that I think that Nina's presentation and also the example showed us fairly well is that we actually need a lot of knowledge. We need a lot of detailed knowledge or robust knowledge about what happens when you destroy, when you protect, and when you restore. And this is where scientists come to play. And in addition to scientists, just like in the play, there's often a lot of naturalists and people who are trained or have an interest in nature, and they provide a lot of the information that we actually use in these practical situations. And these people who have the knowledge, they produce us the kind of helpful guidance as to where to protect and how much to protect or restore. Really importantly, they need to communicate their message to the administration, who will then fix those to predictable metrics so that the other actors in the society can plan their activities and know what will happen and can actually trust the entire system. And here's this illustration that Minna showed before, and I will just place these actors here. So the researchers provide the metrics that defines where there is no net loss, so where we are in the sort of safe boundary. Authorities control that this works. The companies mitigate and compensate, and the landowners conserve and restore. And the habitat bank idea that we are developing fits somewhere between here. We have then had an opportunity to ask Finnish actors in the bioeconomy project where we were looking at regulatory burden on actors. We asked Finnish authorities and Finnish companies holding environmental permits what they would think if they could, whether sustainability compromises could be compensated. And the two messages here are that authorities think that are more positive about it, so they expect that this could work. And authorities, and they are more for mandatory mechanisms, but they're also more interested in the voluntary mechanisms than companies. So companies are a bit more reserved still. And here's another set, and I don't know how well this shows, but I will just, so this is from the EU consultation on no net loss, that is a public consultation, and the sample is such that they have, only those are now reported here who have given their background organization, so the sample was much larger, but we don't know what the respondents are. And I will just show you a couple here, and note that the sample sizes are very different in the different organizations. So we can see that most of these think that the agricultural sector should enter the compensation. So that type of activity that is gradually degrading nature. The business respondents, they were not, just like in Finland, they were not thinking that this sector should be exposed to this rule as much. But interestingly, they actually think that the energy sector and the extractive sector would perhaps be the least they would prefer at least if these were exposed to this new rule. So that's interesting. Possibly the respondents represented these sectors. Okay, NGOs are guessably nature NGOs because they were more pro across the board. They wanted this mechanism, the no net loss principle, to be applied. And then it's interesting that also research thinks that energy sector should perhaps not be as much exposed as other sectors. Okay, I'll conclude with the next slide about the matching the expectations, what I think that we should do. So most of the literature focuses on discussing how to measure this stuff. How to measure and how to then measure whether it's in the future, whether it's here or there, or how to compare things. And that's what it's mostly about. But very importantly, we have to also address the expectations about some actors thinking that this will lead to easing regulatory burden, and other actors actually expecting that we are conserving more biodiversity through this. And these are partly contradictory expectations. We need to choose governance mechanisms, or we need to make strategies for applying parallel different types of governance mechanisms. Whether we do these voluntary offsets like our forerunners are doing now, or whether we develop a mandatory system. We have to acknowledge the sustainability practices that the different sectors and actors already have. We should actually work with them. We shouldn't undermine those systems that are in place. And finally, we have to, just like was in the play, we have to negotiate between the different actors, the different administrative levels, and the different geographical areas. And for this, we need to identify the rights of the different actors, and we need to be quite explicit about what we are going to change. And that's my message. Thank you very much.